Good morning and many thanks for joining us on today's edition of Off the Press, where we discuss newspaper headlines. And to do justice to all of the headlines, we have with me in the studio today Bestman Abumere, a public affairs analyst. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Jimmy Abia, a legal practitioner. Good morning.
My pleasure being with you.
Now, we are counting down to Saturday and a whole lot of developments have continued to unfold, but it's time to look at what the newspaper headlines are saying. Now, let's start with the Punch. And it says 72,775,502 PVCs collected. President Buhari says, let's have faith in INEC. INEC Chair Yakubu rejects resignation call. Vote out incumbent like in 2015, Atiku tells Nigerians. And we also have other headlines, news of my resignation, fake, deliberate propaganda, and that's according to Professor Yemi Oshibajo, the Vice President. And 3 caught for planning to kidnap Lagos businessman for 60 million naira ransom. And the federal government earned 1.1 trillion naira from VAT, recovers 33 billion naira from defaulters. We also have other headlines here. I advised El Rufai against releasing casualty figure in Kaduna crisis. That's according to the Commissioner of Police over there in Kaduna State. And 4 shots during Oshibajo's campaign in Ilorin. 5 fell dead as APC PDP supporters clash in Kano. And the federal government also orders IOCs to pay $20 billion in back taxes. Now, gentlemen, first and foremost, are you impressed with the number of PVCs collected? This time you're seeing an improvement so far, over 72 million out of the 84. What do you think?
Yeah, it's actually a huge improvement, and then it actually shows that Nigerians want to exercise their franchise, because this is quite high, out of about 80-something, 84 million, and about 72. Which is close to 80% or higher than 86% actually having been collected. So it shows that Nigerians are really interested in the electoral process and really want to speak their minds as to who governs them.
And Bestman, we also know that at the end of the day, when we see these figures, what actually translates or determines how much we have an involvement in our democracy is those who turn out on election day proper, not necessarily those who have gotten the PVCs. We've seen the trend from 2011, 2015, and now. What do you really expect this time around?
Well, I think the enthusiasm of the electorate has been dampened a little because of the postponement that took place. Like you rightly said, it is not sufficient to bandy figures around. Whether it will translate into actual participation by the PVC carriers is a different ballgame entirely. But as for the figures, it's quite impressive. But let's hope that Nigerians will go out and then
vote en masse.
Exactly.
And Mahmoud Yakubu rejects resignation call. Some individuals have said, well, since they've described the postponement as an incompetence, then he has to leave that office, among other allegations. What's also your thought on that?
Well, yes, I would have been among those calling for his resignation, but for one reason, the fact that we're so close to the elections, and we understand the process for appointment of INEC chairman is quite tedious and involves different arms of government, involves the legislature. So that means you have to recall the National Assembly to come back and then approve the appointment, and of course the president has to first make that appointment. So it's a whole process, and that would mean having to shift the elections and maybe not meeting with the constitutional deadline for elections, and that could throw the country into a constitutional crisis. So I do not think it's a thing to be done at this time. However, it's not the action of postponing the election, it's what Nigerians have actually expressed their dismay over.
And now, interestingly, the VP has also come out to say, well, the news which has circulated about his resignation is fake and it's a deliberate propaganda. Bestman, what's also your thought? Because we know he's running for vice presidency alongside President Buhari as the APC candidates coming Saturday.
Well, in Aso Rock, a lot of intrigues, they always played out. This is not the first time what brought about this speculation is, of course, the so-called exclusion from the security meeting. And this is not the first time. It will be in the speculative domain that anytime they are holding security meeting, he's not always present, which gives room to, you know, different pontifications from keen observers. But however, that of resignation, nobody would have anticipated that somebody who has gone through even though he's not the de facto president, they went through the primaries and everything together. So it would have been foolhardy for him to just throw in the towel and say he's no more part of the process.
Most definitely. And we also have this headline here that, well, seems to have generated a whole lot of conversation, and that's the Commissioner of Police in Kaduna State advising El Rufai against releasing casualty figure in Kaduna crisis. Now, first and foremost, the figure was pegged at 66, and then later the governor has also come out to say, well, it is now about 130. But at the end of the day, it's the police that is supposed to release all these figures. That's where the criticism has come. It's not the place of the state governor, don't you think?
It's totally not the place of the state governor. And also, I expected that the governor would be more careful as to such releases, especially on the eve of elections. So you would have expected that a governor of a state who you know, has the responsibility to maintain peace within the state would have been more cautious about the things he says in the press.
Well, now it's time to cross over to this day, and with 72.7 million PVCs in their hands, Nigerians decide the fate of Buhari Atiku tomorrow. President, PDP candidate urge mass turnout, refuse to be intimidated, Secondus tells Nigerians. INEC completes deployment of electoral materials. I'm not contemplating resignation, says Yakubu, and please reassure of adequate security. We also have another headline here. Electioneering creates huge passenger traffic for domestic airlines, and federal government's 701 billion naira bailout in jeopardy as Discos remits 25.5%. We have details of that at page 10. And Zamfara APC becomes beneficiary of postponed elections. Now, we see the same headline here, 72.7 million Nigerians expected to go out and vote en masse. But now, this Zamfara APC seems to be the beneficiary here, talking about the postponement, because if the election had held on Saturday, we would have been saying something different last week.
I still see a violation of the electoral process in the whole game they are playing with Zamfara politics, because the court has pronounced that they cannot. The later day appeal court ruling, which prompted Malami, the Attorney General, to hastily write to INEC that the candidates of APC must be admitted to participate in the process. It's still unclear. So, I mean, in other words, there's ambiguity in the whole pronouncement. I don't know why we enact laws we hold in breach rather than in practice. If people violated the electoral law and they were not able to successfully nominate candidates in their state that would have, just like what took place in Rivers State, that would have participated in the election, why force those candidates on Yakub? Yakub has pronounced in the past that there is no way candidates in Zamfara are because they did not meet the deadline for the submission of those who were to participate in the election, vis-a-vis the various court pronouncement. So we don't know where we are really. The kind of benefit they are talking about is, I mean, it sounds ambiguous to me.
Jimmy, quickly.
Yeah, if you look at it, that's actually, until I read the judgment, you wouldn't actually know the basis on which the Court of Appeal now says that they can field candidates. But of course, what he stated is actually the way it should be. If a party has breached the guidelines, has breached the process, you do not expect that they would be allowed ordinarily to gain from that process also, because it actually it gives room to people breaching processes, like this, in further elections in future.
Well, it's time to now shift focus as well again to Vanguard newspaper and polls. FD shuts borders at noon today. Please deploy all its 350,000 officers, men and assets. Army to deploy GOCs, brigade commanders, special task forces. Immigration waives visas for accredited election observers, monitors. We won't interfere in Nigeria's internal affairs, and that's according to the Chinese government. And the value-added tax revenue hits 1.1 trillion naira, up by 14%. That's some good news there. And federal government also needs 19 million litres of diesel to complete second Niger bridge. Police Commissioner faults El Rufai on killings. Ballot box snatchers will be dealt with according to the law. That's the Lagos CP there, and 72.7 million PVCs collected nationwide. We also see a common thread running through. And gunmen attack Oshibajo's convoy in Ilorin. We have details of that in page 41. Now, as at last week, we understood that the borders were shut and it had a tremendous effect on businesses, well, across the 36 states of the nation, losing about over 2 trillion naira. This time around, again, we are seeing the borders closed just to ensure that we don't have any infiltration of persons. But do you think enough security apparatus is prepared, looking at the deployment of 350,000 officers, men and assets, the GOCs, brigade commanders? But we also have the little fear of insurgents and attacks from militants.
Yes, if you look at it, I do not think, because other countries conduct elections, and you don't have a situation where you lock up the entire country, and then even vehicular traffic is restricted and all that simply because of elections. I expect that going forward in future, because there's all these things, shutting of borders, restriction of movement, are not provided for in any law, whether the Electoral Act, no law at all in Nigeria provides for what we are having. It's simply because we know the tendency of politicians and all that. That's why we're going to these extremes. I expect that in future that we will get to that point where elections will hold and people will go about their normal daily activities, while those who want to cast their votes and go back to what they are doing.
Well, we haven't been able to get to that point where we can coordinate the process very well. But immigration also waives visas for accredited election observers. Bestman, what do you think about this? It's a good line, isn't it?
Yeah, if they wanted them to remain, considering what happened on Saturday that led to the postponement of the elections, I think that is the most reasonable thing to do. But coming back to the issue of border vis-a-vis the economic losses we have suffered. Take, for example, today now, the holiday declared by the government is absolutely uncalled for, because it has been put at between $1 to $1.5 billion. What the economy suffers whenever such a thing happens. We have not factored in that of tomorrow. So what we're in anticipation, we are talking of about 6 billion, and this is an economy that is trotting, that you have a lot of unemployment rather. A lot of companies have closed down. The ones that are there are barely surviving, and we are not even productive in the real sense of it, because we are still a commerce-oriented country rather than a productive country. So a government that knows its onions will not embark in this kind of jamboree of having to close the country because we want to conduct election. In civilized crime, like he rightly said, why do you need to close the borders? If we learn to do things according to the Lord, why would we... This morning I was saying, seeing that EFCC is all over the borders to make sure that foreign currencies are not brought in to influence the election. Since when? They will always beat them into the game. Those who want to bring in foreign currencies would have done that even before the elections. So it's an effort in futility.
Okay, still staying with Vanguard now. Deportation of Nigerians from Ghana worrisome, and that's from the federal government of Nigeria. Ghana has actually said, well, we don't want certain Nigerians who don't have work permits. But now the reaction here is that, okay, since you have such laws, we should also enforce the same thing as well here in Nigeria. What do you think?
It's not a matter of an eye for an eye. It's a matter of what our diplomatic policies are. After all, Ghana is supposed to be an ECOWAS country.
It is.
So the freedom of movement that they talk about does not translate into you going to do business illegally. Like here, we accommodate all sorts of characters, and they commit all sorts of crimes and sometimes get away with it. As we have in the case of herdsmen now, who are not wholly Nigerians. We hear some are from Niger Republic, some are from Mali, some are from other African countries. But it's not every country that will behave like Nigeria. So Ghana, I mean, the Ghanaian government has a right to
It has made a stance clear, and we just have to follow through. Now, quickly, we race over to the nation. Buhari, EFCC worry over influx of foreign currencies. We've talked about that. And government to Supreme Court stay off on against case. Observers granted visa fee waiver. FIRs gets 23 billion naira from overdue taxes. Court orders JJ Okocha's arrest because of tax evasion, and land borders to be closed today. INEC cleared 72.7 million to vote. Katsina, Taraba, Kebbi, Zamfara top PVCs table. And the president urges Nigerians to shun violent rumor. Now, it's good to see that Katsina, Taraba, Kebbi, Zamfara top the PVCs table when it comes to collection. Lagos too did quite well, quite impressively.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And now the Daily Sun, 24 hours to elections. I have no reason to quit, says Yakubu. And Ohaneze IPOB, Master raised concern about Igbo safety. We must have faith in INEC that, according to President Buhari, and controversies trail appeal court ruling on Zamfara APC candidates. We have to vote Buhari out, Atiku tells Nigerians. Interesting stance there. Atiku saying we have to vote Buhari out, and it still remains politicking here and there, and campaigns are supposed to ended last night, so no campaigns anymore from today. But as Buhari, Atiku fight for 73 million votes, Gowon, Kolade, and then Aya, all this caution INEC and politicians. What's your word to INEC necessarily, especially when we are talking about being neutral and independent?
Of course, you've said it all. They have to be neutral. They have to show their independence. INEC is an independent organization, or they are supposed to be, by law. And that is what we expect to see, in all these elections. We expect to see free, fair, and credible elections, and the process, conducted according to the law and according to process by INEC.
And now we look at headlines from New Telegraph. 11.2 million registered voters won't vote on Saturday. I'm not under pressure to resign. That's still Yakubu speaking there. And 72.8 million PVCs distributed. Nobody will intimidate voters tomorrow, says Buhari. And Nigerians spent 3.15 trillion naira on airtime in 2018. How Nigeria's presidents emerged from 1960 to 2015. We also have details of that in page 11 and 12 of the New Telegraph, and court orders Okocha's arrest over tax evasion. Yes, we know that, and police will deal with ballot box snatchers.
Is it the footballer?
Yes, for tax evasion. But quickly, I would like to have your thoughts exactly looking at the president saying that, well, no, nobody is going to be intimidated. This comes a little bit sharply in contrast to his statement where he said those who are involved in ballot box snatching would be dealt with ruthlessly. Yes, we understand the stance is clear, saying there's no space for rigging, but do you think his assurance would rub off genuinely on the Nigerians in general?
Is it when the whole process has been militarized already? For example, the military have no business in our elections. And for you to tell them to come out and be part of the process, after the various court pronouncements, most especially in 2015, I think there were 2 court pronouncements that says that the military have no business in electoral process. You have the mobile policeman, you have the regular policeman, and of course the what they call them now, NSCDC or something. That's Civil Defense Corps. Those would have been sufficient. As a matter of fact, if we learn to conduct ourselves in an orderly manner, even the regular police will just be bystanders and just watch how the whole thing transpires. We don't need to militarize the process because it doesn't portray us as people that are civilized. You understand? We thrive in act of incivility by virtue of the way
until
we do
get
things
to the
in this
point
country.
where you say we are able to have a coordinated process,
when are we going to? When are we going to? How many years are we as an independent nation?
We are still a growing democracy.
You see, it's like saying that all these cameras in this studio now, that we should go back to yesteryears when Awolowo brought television, the first television in West Africa, that the instrument they were using, people who must man cameras should go and learn through that when there are modern cameras that make televising and showing pictures very I mean a whole lot easier. You don't do things like that.
Exactly.
We should copy. We are not progressing as a nation. When people are going to the moon, you hear of scientific breakthroughs here and there. What we hear about Nigeria is bloodletting.
Hopefully our democracy gets strengthened from all of these instances and we move forward. But Jimmy, quickly, as we wrap up conversations now, what's also your thought on the president having reassured Nigerians that please come out and vote and nobody will be intimidated? We also looked at his delivery this morning in the 7 a.m. broadcast. What do you make of that as well?
Well, he has said Nigerians should come out and vote. I think that thing, it has been said over and over, not just by himself, but by others. What I want to see, what we have always expected to see, is the practical part of that. Because of course, when you say people should come and vote, and then there are orders already to the security agencies, shoot at sight and all that, you've actually also sort of intimidated, some people who would have come out. But I expect that Nigerians will be bold enough, will be courageous enough to come out there, not only vote, but defend their votes, follow through the process. Yes, also conduct themselves orderly, and also follow through the process to ensure that whatever votes they have cast, also counts. Yes, and then I want to touch on the Okocha thing. I am surprised at that order. It's a bit surprising until I read what it actually led to that. But it's a bit surprising that a court, I do not know.
It's based on tax evasion.
Yes, but that is not. There are ways of ensuring that a citizen pays taxes. The first thing you do, it's quite important that people understand this. The tax laws are clear. The first thing you do, there are processes. There are other means. You don't just arrest citizens, because what would happen, I do not know if this has been going on in Lagos State, whether it has been going on, but I would expect that both the authorities, the tax authorities, and even the courts within Lagos State actually comply with the tax laws as it is. You don't just order arrests of citizens, as the first line of action for tax evasion. That's not the process.
Thank you very much for your time, Jimmy. It's been a pleasure speaking with Jimmy Abia, a legal practitioner. Thank you very much for your contribution. And we've also had in our Lagos studio, Bestman Abumere, the public affairs analyst in the studio, having to deliberate on the newspaper headlines. That's all we can take on today's edition of Off the Press. Remember that you have to keep abreast of all of the news making the headlines. Do stay tuned for other programming of Plus TV Africa.